They call it the Black Pit. A stretch of the North Atlantic where no aircraft can reach, no radar can see, and no help will ever come. In that pit, ships simply vanish. It's September 1943. A convoy of 40 merchant vessels crawls west through sleet and wind, grain, ammunition, oil, the lifeblood of Britain's war. Then, without warning, the ocean erupts. One ship after another disappears in geysers of fire and steam. Radios scream, then go dead. The escorts drop depth charges blindly into the night, but the U-boats are gone. When dawn comes, the sea is empty except for burning oil and lifeboats adrift. At the Admiralty, the reports read like obituaries. Convoy ONS 18 lost 11 ships in a single night. Another convoy follows with 9 more. Something new is hunting them, something no one can see, no one can hear, coming until it's too late. The engineers call it the G7's Zaunkönig, the Germans call it the Wren, and the sailors call it the homing death. An acoustic torpedo doesn't chase a ship's wake or magnetic signature. It listens. The spinning screws of a destroyer sound like a dinner bell in the dark. The torpedo follows that sound until it kills. Within weeks, Allied shipping losses double. Destroyer captains begin ordering silence at sea. No unnecessary engine noise, no music, no talk on deck. Even so, the new torpedoes keep finding them. One veteran describes the terror. "You never saw them. You just heard a faint hum in the water, then hell." Across the Atlantic, Britain's war planners panic. If the U-boats can strike with these new weapons faster than scientists can defend against them, the Atlantic lifeline, the one that feeds Britain and fuels the war, might snap. And yet the person who will stop it isn't an admiral or a shipwright or even a sailor. She is a 27-year-old physicist named Joan Curran, and almost no one in uniform knows her name. In a small laboratory on the Dorset coast, Curran works behind barbed wire under the bland title Telecommunications Research Establishment. It's a place filled with young scientists, mathematicians and engineers trying to trick German electronics. Radar jammers, decoys, chaff. Most of them are men, loud and confident. Curran moves quietly among them, short-haired, Welsh accented, intensely practical. She's the one who asks, if the torpedo hunts by hearing, what happens if we make it hear something else? The idea is absurd on paper. To build a sound louder than a destroyer, a false target that sings a torpedo off its mark. But Curran is used to impossible problems. 3 years earlier, she helped invent radar countermeasures made from strips of aluminum foil. Window, they called it, that blinded Nazi radar across Europe. The RAF used it on D-Day. Now the Navy comes to her with another riddle. The torpedoes that hear. Every night, the casualty lists grow. Men vanish beneath waves colder than steel. Families in Liverpool and Cardiff receive telegrams marked missing at sea. Curran studies the technical data, the frequencies of ship propellers, the acoustic patterns underwater, and sketches something new, an underwater noisemaker towed behind a ship, built to scream and rattle louder than any engine alive. The idea seems childish to some of the officers who visit her lab, a woman physicist tinkering with metal pipes and propellers while the Royal Navy bleeds. But she doesn't argue, she just builds. She wires motors, tests them in tanks, listens through hydrophones as her device drowns out the sound of real ships. When it works, she gives it a name that fits its sly purpose, Foxer. Back at sea, the captains know nothing of her. They only know that every time they sail, more of them don't come back. The Battle of the Atlantic has become a war of frequencies, and the Allies are losing. But in a locked room above the Dorset cliffs, Joan Curran listens to the ocean's noise through a set of headphones. Somewhere below those waves, German torpedoes are listening too. The question is which one of them will outsmart the other first. The night belongs to the hunters now, Way, but before it's over, one woman's invention will make the hunters chase ghosts. If you're drawn to true, forgotten stories like this one, hit subscribe. so you won't miss the next untold chapter of World War II, winter 1943. The laboratories on England's southern coast are freezing, the blackout curtains dripping with condensation. Inside, the hum of generators drowns the wind. Here, amid coils of wire and salt-stained blueprints, physicist Joan Curran begins her quiet war. She is 27 years old, Welsh-born, Cambridge-trained, and, to many in uniform, invisible. Cambridge didn't even grant women degrees when she studied there. Her diploma would come only years later, backdated out of courtesy. But in the research huts at the telecommunications research establishment in Swanage, courtesy counts for nothing. What matters is results. Curran knows how to make enemies mishear. 3 years earlier, she had helped design Window, the radar cluttering strips of aluminium foil that blinded German radar before the D-Day landings. That trick turned entire bombing raids into ghost fleets. Now, her assignment is harder. The Navy wants to know how to fool a weapon that hunts by sound, a torpedo that thinks. The Royal Navy's scientists have tried everything. Some propose underwater flares, others sonic pulses to confuse the torpedo's primitive ears. None work. The new German weapon, the G7E's acoustic torpedo, homes on any mechanical rhythm between 24 and 30 kHz, the exact hum of Allied propeller screws. Once launched, it listens, adjusts course, and strikes. Destroyers meant to protect the convoys now draw fire instead. Commanders begin keeping their engines at half speed to survive. Convoys slow to a crawl, easy prey for U-boats. Curran watches the patterns of failure with a scientist's detachment, but every report is personal. She has friends on escort ships, and she knows each loss means hundreds dead. The Navy men who brief her speak in cautious tones, careful not to reveal classified convoy routes to a civilian, especially a woman. She notices the hesitation, the pauses before they answer her questions, the glances between officers that say, "Is she meant to be here?" But Curran does what she always does, listens harder than anyone else. She requests every test record, every sonar trace, every recovered torpedo part the Admiralty can spare. The notes fill an entire wall of her hut. On the floor, she lines up small wooden models, ship hulls, propellers, microphones, miniature worlds to recreate the problem in silence. Her husband, physicist Samuel Curran, works in a neighboring hut on radar electronics. At night, they compare notes, two young scientists fighting separate wars under the same blackout. By December, she has an idea. What if you could drag something behind a ship that made more noise than the ship itself? A mechanical decoy that would roar and clatter underwater, luring the torpedo away like a phantom convoy. It sounds absurd. Admiralty engineers tell her the ocean will swallow any artificial noise within meters. Others warn that the racket could mask the escort's own sonar, leaving them blind. She listens politely, then gets back to work. With a handful of technicians, she builds a prototype, a cage of steel pipes filled with rotating blades, powered by the ship's propeller wash. When towed, the device shudders violently, kicking up a chaotic roar through the water. It doesn't imitate a ship's rhythm, it overwhelms it. Curran measures the decibel levels through hydrophones and smiles. The readings are almost deafening. The first tests take place off Portland Harbor in January 1944. The sea is grey, the air thick with sleet. On deck, sailors eye the strange contraption dangling from the cables like a bundle of scrap. When they release it, the ship's stern trembles, the water boils with bubbles. On the hydrophone, the propeller hum disappears beneath a thunder of metallic screams. "Sounds like the devil's own bagpipes," one rating mutters. The nickname sticks. The scientists call it FXR for Foxer. But the test has a problem. The noise is so intense it blinds the escort's own sonar. A ship using a Foxer can no longer hear approaching submarines. The officers protest, "How are we supposed to fight if we can't listen?" Curran's answer is simple. better deaf than dead. The results are undeniable. When dummy torpedoes are launched toward a ship towing the Foxer, almost all curve away from their target and explode harmlessly behind it. The Admiralty orders more units at once. Factories across Britain begin producing thousands, each about the size of a steel dustbin, each capable of saving a shipload of men. Still, Curran's name doesn't appear on the memos. Official correspondence lists the device as a naval countermeasure developed at TRE. Her male colleagues sign the reports. She doesn't complain. She knows the rule: victory first, credit later. In the mess halls of the escort fleets, rumors spread about a new secret weapon that makes false ships. Sailors imagine high-frequency wizardry or magic bubbles. None guessed that the answer came from a woman in a wooden hut who once built radar ghosts from kitchen foil. By spring 1944, convoys crossed the Atlantic again under a strange new sound, a metallic howl that echoes miles behind them. U-boat captains begin hearing the same noise through their hydrophones, a second ship following the first, louder, closer, irresistible. They aim at the wrong target and die for it. For the first time in months, the convoy records show a line of zeros under "ships lost." To the men at sea, it feels like a miracle. To Joan Curran, it's physics. Beautiful, messy, life-saving physics. She walks home through the Dorset fog, exhausted. Somewhere far out in the Atlantic, her invention is singing. She imagines that sound, the shriek of steel that drowns the hunter's ears, and wonders if anyone on those ships will ever know her name. They won't, not yet. But the ocean has started to listen to her instead of them. By the spring of 1944, Britain is holding its breath. Every convoy that reaches Liverpool means food on the tables and bombs in the bomb bays. Every one that doesn't is a headline in black ink. But now, somewhere in the Atlantic, a new sound follows the ships. A metallic scream that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once.
That sound is Foxer.
It begins as an experiment in a Dorset tank and ends as a roar that can be heard for miles through seawater. Each device is a frame of hollow steel pipes, perforated and chained together in pairs. When towed behind a destroyer, water rushes through the pipes, producing a chaotic clatter across the same frequencies that the German torpedoes seek. The noise is constant, brutal, and to the enemy's acoustic sensors, irresistible. At the Telecommunications Research Establishment, Joan Curran oversees the refinement. She measures, listens, adjusts. Engineers bring her fragments of recovered German torpedoes so she can understand how their hydrophones think. The weapon's small guidance system, built by the German firm AEG, uses twin microphones to detect a ship's propeller beat and steer toward the louder side. Curran's goal is simple: make the sea scream louder than the ship. The first operational convoy to use her invention sails from Liverpool on 24 December 1943 under snow. The destroyers HMS Fame and HMS Inconstant stream 2 Foxers apiece. Within hours, U-boat U-275 fires a G-70's torpedo. Hydrophone operators aboard the escorts hear the familiar rising whine. Then a few seconds later, a distant explosion astern. The ship doesn't even shudder. The torpedo has veered toward the decoy and detonated harmlessly in its turbulence. The report reaches London by dawn. Device FXR effective, 1 torpedo deflected. It is the shortest and perhaps most important sentence of Curran's career. Within weeks, entire fleets are towing Foxers: convoy JW-58 to Russia, convoy ONS-29 across the Atlantic, convoy CU-49 carrying fuel to Britain, all trail the clattering chains that fill the deep with man-made thunder. German U-boat crews begin to curse that devilish noise that fills their headphones, masking every other sound. Some commanders refuse to fire acoustics at all, reverting to the old straight-running torpedoes that once again miss or fail. The advantage that once terrified the Allies disappears as quickly as it came. From the quiet of her hut, Curran receives fragments of the results. Success summaries, graphs of loss rates, occasional notes of thanks typed by naval staff who have no idea who she is. The charts tell their own story. Shipping losses fall by more than half in 3 months. The Atlantic lifeline is open again. But success brings complications. Fox's deafening roar protects a ship, but blinds its sonar. Escorts must sail in wider formations to avoid masking each other's ears. Coordinating a convoy becomes a symphony of physics, the spacing of sound, the choreography of protection. The Navy's tactical officers refine the procedures. Curran refines the science. Each new version is smaller, lighter, easier to deploy, nicknamed FXR2, FXR3. Cat, mouse, fanfare. Each one an echo of her first sketch on a damp sheet of graph paper. For the scientists, there is little glory. Their world is secret reports, coded memos, coffee gone cold over oscilloscopes. For Curran, it is also isolation. Women in uniform file paperwork or drive ambulances. Women in physics are almost unheard of. When visitors tour the facility, she is sometimes mistaken for a secretary. She smiles, lets them think what they like, and returns to her equations. She writes to her husband, Samuel, now stationed in Scotland designing proximity fuses for anti-aircraft shells. "I sometimes think we are all ghosts, seen only by what we make." It is a single line that captures her war. In May 1944, as Allied forces prepare for D-Day, Foxers accompany almost every escort group in the Atlantic. The U-boat arm, once the terror of the seas, suffers catastrophic losses. In June alone, 40 submarines fail to return to their pens. The Germans respond with a countermeasure. The T-11 Zaunkönig II, tuned to ignore the loudest noise. But production is too late. The tide has turned. Curran's work continues, adapting frequencies, experimenting with twin-towed decoys that simulate entire convoys. At night, she stands by the test pool and listens through a hydrophone. The sound is monstrous, grinding metal, splintering bubbles, a mechanical scream that seems to swallow the world. Yet in that chaos, she hears order, the rhythm of survival. Outside her hut, the coastal air smells of salt and oil. News from the sea filters in. Convoy HX-300, the largest of the war, arrives safely with over 160 ships, not one sunk. The mathematicians cheer, but Curran simply exhales. The numbers mean thousands of men alive. Still, the official communiques make no mention of her. Admiralty files attribute the invention to a team at TRE, and when the press later writes of the ingenious noise device that baffled Nazi torpedoes, the byline belongs to the Navy. For Joan, recognition is irrelevant, or at least she tells herself it is. Her satisfaction lies in the quiet between sinkings. Yet there is a private cost, the stress of secrecy, the constant pressure to prove herself, and the quiet erasure of her work weigh heavily. After the war, she will admit to a sense of detachment, as if she had built a miracle that no one saw her build. But in 1944, there is no time for reflection. There are still convoys to protect, new torpedoes to counter, new frequencies to master. By late 1944, the Foxer has evolved again. The Navy's fanfare system uses rotating pipes driven by compressed air, producing a shriek even the new German sensors cannot filter out. The U-boats begin calling it the false convoy. Hydrophone operators describe the Atlantic as filled with ghosts. The hunters, deafened by their own prey, can no longer tell what is real. In her final wartime report, Curran writes in her crisp hand, "The fundamental principle remains, where perception is a weapon, deception must be the shield." It is both scientific and philosophical, a statement about sound but also about herself. By Christmas 1944, she leaves the coast for a new assignment in Scotland, where her husband's laboratory work will later help create the first British nuclear program. When the war ends, few know what she did. The files remain classified for decades. But in those last convoys of 1944 and 1945, when ships steam through a dark ocean alive with false echoes, her fingerprints are everywhere. The Battle of the Atlantic, the longest battle of the Second World War, has turned in Britain's favour. The merchantmen still sail through storms and U-boats still stalk them, but now the balance is different. When the torpedoes come, they no longer find their mark. They find Joan Curran's voice screaming back at them from the deep. By the winter of 1944, the Atlantic no longer sounds like the Atlantic. It screams. Every convoy bound for Britain drags a chain of clattering steel through the water, Curran's Foxes, filling the ocean with man-made thunder. The first time sailors hear it, they hate it. The vibration rattles the hull, the shriek echoes through the mess decks, the screws quiver as if the ship itself were crying out. But to those who have seen friends vanish in columns of spray, that awful sound becomes a lullaby. Noise means safety. In January, convoy ONS 31 steams through a gale northwest of Ireland. The escorts tow Foxes 2 cables astern. In the control room of U-629, Oberleutnant Schumacher presses his earphones tighter. Through static, he hears chaos, an orchestra of crashes, clangs and metallic shrieks, no propeller beat, no clean signature to lock onto. His acoustic torpedoes chase phantom noise until their batteries die. The convoy passes unharmed. Hours later, the U-boat is spotted on radar and sunk by depth charges. None of the convoy ships even know they were hunted. Across the North Atlantic, similar reports flood the Admiralty. Torpedoes detonate harmlessly far astern. U-boats retreat after failed attacks, their captains cursing the steel bagpipes that fill every channel. German intelligence knows the name Foxer by spring, but can't reproduce it accurately. Each copy shatters itself within minutes. The technical war of acoustics, one fought in secrecy between scientists who never meet, tilts decisively toward Britain. By March 1944, Allied shipping losses fall to their lowest of the war. Only 6 merchant ships are sunk that month, compared with 45 the previous autumn. The curve on the Admiralty chart, once rising like a heartbeat, drops flat. For sailors who have spent years measuring the ocean in funerals, the silence feels unreal. The destroyer, HMS Bentinck, records an encounter that becomes legend. 2 German torpedoes close in at dusk. Hydrophones pick them up, converging from port and starboard. Seconds before impact, both torpedoes veer off, spinning madly in the wake, chasing the roaring Foxes. They detonate together in a single golden flash behind the stern. The crew cheer. In the wardroom, a sign appears the next day. If you can hear it, you're still alive. Curran never sees these moments. She receives them in typed reports, numbers circled in red pencil. Each one is proof that a machine she built in a wooden hut now hums beneath the keels of half the Allied fleet. The mathematicians call it counter-acoustic deception. The sailors call it magic. To her, it is simply sound turned into armor. The Germans fight back with desperation. Admiral Karl Dönitz orders new torpedo patterns, altered sensors, faster attack runs. Engineers develop the T-11 Zaunkönig II, designed to ignore the loudest noise and home on a subtler beat. But the device reaches few submarines before the war ends. Too little, too late. The Atlantic, once the graveyard of convoys, becomes the graveyard of U-boats. In May 1944, as Allied ships mass for Operation Overlord, convoys of landing craft, fuel barges and troop carriers stream toward the Channel. All are shielded by the same sonic wall. German hydrophone operators along the French coast report multiple contacts. So many echoes they can no longer distinguish real fleets from decoys. The ocean has become a mirror maze built from Curran's equations. Out at sea, crews begin giving their Foxes names: Old Growler, Metal Mary, the Screamer. When one jams and falls silent, sailors grow uneasy, listening for the sudden emptiness behind the ship. The chief engineer of HMS Dakers writes in his log, The quiet is worse than the noise. In silence you remember what the ocean used to take. Through 1944 and into 1945, the statistics tell a story no headline can. More than 80% of Germany's U-boats are destroyed or captured before surrender. Over 30,000 submariners never return to port. The hunters who once prowled in darkness now drift to the bottom, undone not by might, but by deception. When the war in Europe ends on 8th May 1945, the convoys finally sail without fear. Crews haul up their Foxers, scarred and rusted, and pile them on the docks in Liverpool and Glasgow. The chains clatter one last time, leaving grooves in the cobblestones. Some men keep a fragment, a bolt, a length of pipe as a talisman. Few know who invented it. The paperwork lists the device as Classified Admiralty Stores FXR. Joan Curran spends VE Day in Scotland with her husband Samuel, now leading secret research on atomic detection for the newly formed British nuclear project. The streets fill with singing, the church bells ring for the first time in 6 years. She smiles, but quietly. She knows how many of those bells toll for men who never heard her machines save them. Later, when the Navy publishes its official history of the Battle of the Atlantic, her name appears once, in a footnote, spelled incorrectly. She laughs when a friend shows her. "It's fine," she says. "The important thing is that they listened." Yet the legacy of sound continues. The principle behind Foxer, the use of acoustic decoys to defeat homing weapons, becomes the foundation for all modern anti-torpedo countermeasures. Submarines of the Cold War, sleek and nuclear-powered, still carry electronic descendants of her noisy chain. They call them noisemakers. The physics is unchanged. Confusion saves lives. But in 1945, all that lies ahead. For now, Joan Curran walks along the Scottish coast where the wind smells of diesel and salt. The war is over. The sea, for the first time in years, is quiet. She listens, half expecting to hear that clattering roar somewhere beyond the horizon, the sound that drowned out death itself. Silence answers her. The war ends, and the sound stops. In the calm that follows victory, Britain's coastal towns fall quiet. Shipyards empty. Radar masts rust. The laboratories that once shook with the noise of engines and generators are sealed, their files stamped top secret, not to be released. Joan Curran packs her notebooks into a single wooden trunk and moves north with her husband, Samuel. Together they help lay the foundations of Britain's post-war nuclear program, but in every new project she hears a trace of the ocean, that metallic roar that once meant life. Her name doesn't appear in the newspapers. Awards go to admirals and committees. The men who knew her work say little. Most of what she built remains classified. She never seems bitter. "I was lucky," she tells a friend years later. Most of us never see our work save anyone. The Battle of the Atlantic fades into history, but the physics she mastered refuses to die. In the 1950s, American and British submarines adopt refined acoustic decoys, sleek canisters packed with spinning impellers, born from the same principle she proved in 1943. When the enemy listens, you answer with louder lies. Every sailor who survives a modern torpedo strike owes something to a young Welsh physicist who refused to accept that sound belonged to the hunters. Joan Curran lives long enough to watch the century change. In 1993, decades after her invention first screamed through the Atlantic, she receives belated recognition for her work on radar countermeasures. Foxer is barely mentioned. She never corrects the record. She dies in 1999 quietly at 83, the woman who taught silence to scream. Today, when historians speak of radar, chaff and countermeasures, her name returns, flickering back from the static. In naval museums, a few corroded pipes hang on display, labeled acoustic decoy, type FXR, Foxer. There is no signature beneath the glass, only the echo of her work. And if you listen long enough, in that hush between waves where the ocean holds its secrets, you can still imagine the faint rattle of steel far below. a ghost sound from another century.